Well, good morning and welcome to the December 30, 2017 edition of the Bible Delight in the Details. I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and this is the third in our Christmas programs. I'm sorry for not being better about every day during the holiday season doing the Bible Delight in the Details, but busyness. But I should keep first things first. I'm sorry. A lot of people are very disturbed they're very disturbed to begin with, but they're very disturbed about the origins of the Christmas tradition of celebrating on December 25th. And you may have heard that it was coincided with a Roman festival called Saturnalia. Saturnalia actually happens during the winter equinox. So it's not the 25th. It would be the shortest day of the year, which would be the 21st and the 22nd. And then there was also a Roman holiday known as the Calids of January. Janus was the forward and backward-looking god of doorways and new beginnings, hence why we have January as the first of our year. And so sometimes people put that together, Saturnalia and the Calids of January, and they say, well, that's why we celebrate Christmas on the 25th. But that really is not very satisfying. Other people say no, it is to coincide with Hanukkah. And there's more understanding there, because Hanukkah, of course, is the Jewish festival of lights. And the early Christians did associate Christ with light. As you know, he's talked about as a light in the Bible. The Messiah would be a light unto the Gentiles. And so God's miraculous providing of the oil 165 years or so prior, during the cleansing of the temple after what they thought was the Antichrist, one of the Antichrists, usurping Israel. That was very appropriate for Christ to be celebrated during Hanukkah. However, that's not exactly helpful either, because as we know, Hanukkah, like all the Jewish festivals, is tied to the moon and different counting of days of the seasons, and so it changes. It's not a static time every single year. So where did we get this Christmas as the 25th? Well, the truth is we are not absolutely sure, but recent scholarship has introduced a fascinating theory that I've actually been teaching for several years now, and I just throw it out for your consideration. You know, the Bible has tons of details. That's one thing that makes it very different from myths, which are much more general and talk about once upon a time and don't seem to be said in any particular time or a particular location. The Bible is full of details, and I always tell my Sunday school students, pay attention to the details. They're there for a reason. There are a lot of details that we would love to know as people of faith. We would love to know exactly what was said at certain times or what people thought. And sometimes those details are not given to us. And other times details that maybe we think, why would I care about that, are given. And I always tell people, God has put in the Bible those details that have significance for us right now, not just to tickle our ears and because we're interested, but because we need to know them. Because there's some insight into God and into His work and into our reason for being here. There's something there. We may not know it yet. We may not have discerned it yet. But with scholarship and with the help of the Holy Spirit and with the right attitude, hopefully every day we can learn more and more and have a deeper walk with the Lord. Now, back to the detail about that might explain Christmas as being celebrated on the 25th of December. There is a detail in the Gospels where it talks about the birth of John the Baptist. As many of you know, in the Jewish culture, during Passover, which is always in the spring, either in March or April, there is a tradition during the Seder meal that the youngest child goes to the door and looks out, and he's looking for the prophet Elijah, because it is prophesied in the Bible that Elijah would foretell the coming of the Messiah. And so our Jewish brethren to this day still look to see, is Elijah here? And they even place a cup on the table called Elijah's cup. So that if the prophet is going to be there this year and announce the coming of the Messiah, he will have a cup and partake in Passover. We know that John the Baptist is understood by Christians as being that Elijah. In fact, Christ even said that John the Baptist is, if you can take it, literally, that's the words he used. If you can accept this, if you can take this, then he is Elijah. He is coming in the spirit of Elijah. And that's exactly what John did. As you know, John's ministry was all about clearing the way and pointing the way to Christ. And once Christ had entered into his earthly ministry, now John's earthly ministry decreased. As John said, he must increase, I must decrease. It's with that understanding that one of the details from the gospel story makes a lot of difference, and that is the story about his birth, John the Baptist. We are told that in the Gospels, we're told that his father was Zechariah, a priest, and we're told that he was of the family of Abijah. Now, back 1,000 years prior, King David had a problem. There were so many priests who, as Levites, were supposed to perform ceremony in the temple, that frankly he was running over with priests, and Jerusalem was just there wasn't enough room for them, but more importantly there was no work for them to do in the temple because there were just too many priests. So David created a calendar where 2 weeks every year the priest would come from his home and would perform the ceremonies and then would go back. You can see this in 2 Chronicles. We know exactly when Zechariah, father of John the Baptist, would have been in Jerusalem performing his priestly duties. And it would have been the first couple weeks of June. Now, as the story goes, you may remember he's in the temple performing his duties, and an angel of the Lord comes to him and tells him that his aged wife, Elizabeth, is going to bear a child. He doesn't really believe it. He starts to argue slightly with the angel, and the angel says, well, because of this, you're not going to be able to speak until the baby is born. And what is interesting is right after this, it says that he went back to his wife, and the connotation in the language, in the Greek language, is immediately the baby was conceived, which would place the conception of John the Baptist roughly at the end of June. Now, if you take a regular gestation period of 9 months, that would place the birth of John the Baptist roughly in late March, which in the traditional calendar year that most people think Christ was born, it just so happens that Passover falls at the end of March, which would be appropriate because everyone thought that Elijah would come to proclaim the Messiah during Passover. So we can't be didactic about this, but it is mighty interesting. Now, the Gospels further tell us that Christ's conception by the Holy Spirit was 6 months after John was conceived. And we know that when Mary visited her cousin Elizabeth, John, the baby still in the womb, leapt in his mother's womb at the presence of his Lord, at the presence of Jesus in Mary's womb. If you look at 6 months later, after the end of March, that would mean that Jesus would have actually been born toward the end of September. Now, it's interesting that the Catholic Church has for many years celebrated Michaelmas, which is September 29th, and it is their time when they celebrate the archangel bringing the news to the shepherds of the birth of Christ. So there was a very early belief in the early church that has been perpetuated through the Catholic Church that actually the birth of Christ happened in late September, which makes a lot more sense according to the gospel story, because there would not have been shepherds in December out in the fields tending their flocks by night. They would have come in long before that, probably by October. So if this is true, if the Catholics have it right, and Christ was actually born near Michaelmas, September 29th or thereabout, if you take September 29th and you look at the perfect gestational period for a baby, the perfect number, and you back it up, it means that Christ would have been conceived on December the 25th. We do not know if this is the case, and does it really matter when he was born? It doesn't. But it is absolutely fascinating to me that there are details and clues and hints in the Bible that a lot of us have yet to even consider. Is God trying to tell us something? Perhaps. So for those of you that are worried that we are celebrating a pagan, based on a pagan festival, take heart. The great miracle is that God himself, incarnated man, became man. And whether he did it on December 25th or whenever, it is still a great miracle. But I think perhaps we may have just stumbled on a detail that explains why December 25th is a great day to celebrate the coming of the King. I'm J. Lenora Bressler. Visit me on the next edition of the Bible. Delight in the details. Have a great day.